Hi, everybody, and welcome to Birth Talk. Today, I'm talking with Jenny Hatch. She is the author of Elijah Birth. She'll tell you where she can get you that book. And she's a mother of 5, and she's very inspired for the family. I would say Jenny is a pro-family person. The family is so important. And beginning at birth, the father's role in birth. We're going to talk today about why it's important, why he should be there, how he can overcome some reluctance, and just the beauty of birth. And in today's coronavirus days, having an unexpected emergency childbirth, it's important to know. It's important to be calm and to not have the father freak out and not know what to do and all that. So we hope to comfort you today. We hope to do this in about 30 minutes. So there's just going to be a lot of information. And so welcome, Jenny.
Thank you, Lynn. It's so wonderful to be here. I would first like to tell everybody about my book, Elijah Birth, How to Turn the Hearts of the Fathers, which is exclusively an ebook available on Amazon. I did not do a hard copy of this book. I did pour my heart and soul into it by first conducting a survey with dozens of couples who had planned couples home births. And from that survey and from the generosity of the people I interviewed, I came up with this book of birth stories, tips, all sorts of essays and columns written by me, some of which appeared in print media, tended to be underground magazines, but they were out there. And then just my own stories are in this book. And so it's a big book. It's available for $10 on Amazon, and I'd love for you to go check it out if you are a reluctant father. Can I tell a little bit of my background, Lynn?
Yes, please do.
My husband and I certified as Bradley Childbirth educators the second year of our marriage. So this was 31 years ago. And for 8 years, we taught in our home Bradley Childbirth classes, which are all natural, no drugs. Most of our couples gave birth in the hospital, but a few of them had home births with midwives, and a couple of brave souls had births at home alone. And so this is our background as educators. In 1996, I gave birth to my 4th child, and overwhelmed with small children and homeschool, I decided that I wanted to move all of my efforts online because I could tell that's where the world was going. And my husband was an IT worker, and we had a really fast internet connection in our home. And then I had my in-house tech support in the form of my husband to help me every step of the way. He still helps me today.
Great.
So my ministry, my education efforts since that time, and that was 1996, have almost all happened online. And because of that fact, I have crossed paths with hundreds and hundreds of couples in chat rooms, in Facebook groups, all over the world who have been into unassisted childbirth. And so because of that fact, I kind of have my finger on the pulse of where people are. And one of the biggest questions everybody has from beginning to end is, how did you get your husband to do this? Husband reluctance has been the #1 issue for most moms. How do you get them to participate? So Lynn, that's where I'd like to have this chat be a jumping off point. How did you get Bob to do it?
Conversation over time. We had, let me see, 4 kids in the hospital, and some idea out of nowhere, a year after my 4th baby was born, I said, if we ever have another child, we'll have it at home. Oh, you're crazy. And then when I got pregnant, I met the right people. I started reading, I started thinking, and it just was a very obvious progression. We saw that in the hospital, the father's unnecessary. At one point, a doctor said, go down and have a sandwich. Her labor's not going along. And he thought, well, no, a husband and wife are creating a baby. They're going to give birth to the baby. They're going to raise a baby. Why shouldn't the husband be very involved if you all want to be involved? So we really, we just kind of came, we flowed into it after 4 hospital births, not right away. We didn't know at first. So that's
we had similar. We had 3 hospital births. One of them was a C-section. My daughter was breech. And then the third one was a VBAC, a successful VBAC after a very long labor. And after that birth, I was like, you know what? I think I'm done giving birth in the hospital. I don't want to do it here. I had learned enough by my teaching and education that I really felt comfortable taking it back back to our home. And so with my fourth pregnancy, I not only gave birth at home alone, I also did all of my own prenatal care, which again, because I've been studying birth every day for 7 years, there was a comfort level there that I think, you just eventually get to. And so that was where it was for us. And my husband, I would say with both of our home births, he was nervous. He really, wanted it to go well for my sake. And what he eventually came to is it's her body. She's the one who has to give birth. So he should defer to what I wanted, which was I wanted to have the babies at home. Yeah. So if you want the details of those births, you're going to have to read my books, because I'm not going to go there. I want to talk more about husband reluctance. But again, the number one question is reluctance. How do you get this guy to do something he does not want to do? And then in certain cultures, in certain faiths, they flat out say right in their scriptures, husbands should not be at a birth. So that's another issue, that there's certain people who they feel like they shouldn't go to the birth. And so there's some cultural things that need to be overcome. There's some, just idiosyncrasies around personalities that some men just do not want to be around a birth. And so all of that has to be taken into consideration. But with this corona thing and the sheltering that we've been doing, where you couldn't even bring a home birth midwife into that situation without, quote, breaking the law, it might just be you and your husband. And so it's under the umbrella of that scenario that I would just love to share a couple of things that I know to be true, that I think might help moms and dads out there.
All right. Yeah. Well, let's go. Go ahead.
All right. Number one is hydration. There are many women who get preterm labor because they're dehydrated, and they'll go to the hospital. Yeah, good on you, Lynn. They'll go to the hospital, and the hospital's, oh, here's your water, you're dehydrated. Especially out west where we have high altitude, desert, wind, we tend to get dehydrated. So that's number one, stay hydrated. Number two, you need to read a couple of books on prenatal nutrition. And it's learning about hydration and nutrition that really jacked up my comfort level with doing my own prenatal care. Once I realized that toxemia, which is the scary disease that women often get the 7th month of pregnancy, once I realized that was preventable, that was my key to staying home. Because I realized if I could be proactive and prevent this thing, I didn't need to walk those last few weeks of pregnancy in fear. And so that's number one, just basics, food, water.
And I just want to say what I'm hearing and seeing in your confident attitude is taking authority, taking responsibility for yourself and your pregnancy. You don't have to delegate it to a doctor, to an expert. You can learn these things yourself. You can grow in confidence. It's beautiful that we have 40 weeks of gestation so we can build in 40 weeks of knowledge and comfort and wisdom about what is happening with our body. But go ahead.
Exactly. And so much of healthy pregnancy is just common sense. You listen and hear people talking, you're like, well, of course. And yet it seems like it's so hard for so many women to do that. I recently realized that the prematurity rate jacked up to 10%. It used to be 8% in America. So we're going in all the wrong directions. It's recently 10%. What are young women not learning about how to prevent premature birth? That is just common sense. If they think it through, you don't want to get dehydrated. You don't want to go too long without eating some food. And there's so much information out there you can get about what constitutes a great prenatal diet. I did the Brewer diet with all of my last 4 pregnancies. Once I learned about it, I felt very comfortable with it. It felt right to me to eat that diet. And so you can Google that, find out what that is. If you take a Bradley class, you will find out about the Brewer diet. So diet, water, and then exercise. When you're going to do a birth, it's like running a marathon. First birth, the labor's often 12 hours long. That's a long time to be doing anything. And when you're giving birth, you've got these contractions coming. And so you want to exercise your body so that you're strong enough to do that marathon of labor. And just walking, getting out, swimming. If you're home, you can practice yoga, you can lift weights, not too heavy, but just basic, again, fundamentals of pregnancy are just common sense. Anything you want to add to that? You're the exercise guru.
Nope, I'm not the expert. We are all the experts of our own body. We should not delegate it thinking someone's an expert. You tell me. I want to say hi to Susan Fierro-Baig and Billy Hall. And Billy Hall writes in, the common sense is important. And there's so much blather in the expert books. The books are written towards women, towards midwives, towards the woman. The father still is like some extra peripheral piece in the whole process. And so tell us some of the benefits of the father experiencing childbirth in a very intimate, involved way during our conversation.
Yeah. Well, for me, I chose my husband as my main birth attendant because I knew he would go the distance with me. And this is something that people who are not involved in home birth circles, they may not understand. When the midwife comes into your home and assumes authority of the birth, she may have an agenda. She may want to just be there for a couple hours, and then if the baby's not out, she wants to go home and be with her family. So there is a pattern of midwives coming in and doing things to a pregnant woman that a husband would never even dream of doing, like putting there's a drug you can put on to induce a labor. Putting that on, can't think of it.
I don't know what it is. Somebody else will clear it up later.
It's on the tip of my tongue, but it's a drug that when you put it on the cervix, it can make the contractions just explode. And quite often it will produce a baby, but it can also cause a hemorrhage. And so that's something that you don't want to have in a home birth. You're not set up for it. So you want your husband with you because he's the one who's going to go the distance with you, no matter how long or how short. For me, that was it. I knew that no matter how the labor went, he would be right there by my side. And the hormones of birth are very similar to the hormones of sex. And when you want to be intimate with someone, what do? You go off alone. You want things to be dark. You want things to be quiet. And that's where you can have the ultimate sexual experience with your spouse. It's the same way with birth. You know, it's typical in the animal kingdom that they'll cloister away in a closet, and it should be the same way with women at home. If the longer you want your labor to go, invite more people into your birth.
Yeah.
You want it to be a long, hard thing, invite lots of people into the bedroom to watch you. I promise you will have a long labor. If you want to be short, if you want to be precise and hormones lining up right, either labor alone or invite your lover in. Anybody who gets between a woman's legs besides her loving partner makes her tense up. It makes her nervous.
Very interesting. Yeah, I think people just get over it in the hospital with strangers. They just have to say, okay, the heck with modesty, the heck with privacy. You may treat me as a biological specimen because you're an expert, quote unquote. So, but
then you have the husband going, well, I'm not a midwife. I don't know how to check heart tones. I don't know how to do vaginal exams. I don't know how to do what a doctor does. That's the point. You don't need to do those things. Your job is to keep her hydrated.
Or rub her lower back or
give her a back rub. At the key point of my last labor with my 5th child, my husband came in. I was approaching transition, about to push. And he said, what do you want? What do you need? And I said, I want you to sing to me.
Uh-huh.
And so Paul has this amazing high tenor, Irish tenor voice. He pulled out our Mormon hymn book and started singing hymns. Yeah. And it was perfect. It was all I needed. I didn't need him to touch me or coach me. But by singing those hymns, he invited the Holy Spirit into the space. It calmed me. It calmed the baby. Yeah. And we moved through transition so smoothly. And then we got down to brass tacks with pushing. And Ben was a very large baby. He was 15-inch head. And it was a difficult birth because my water had broken 3 days before.
Wow.
And I think I was a little bit dehydrated. And as he came through the birth canal, it was like birthing a brick. It was just a really hard push.
Yeah.
And so I had a lot of pain. You know, didn't take any drugs for pain relief, but you know, there was some pain. And Paul singing to me was just the key. Yeah. And you know, when the baby comes out, your husband doesn't have to do anything. He just has to catch. Just catch.
I think what you're talking about is trust. You have to learn what's going to happen. You have to read the right books, you know, listen to the right stories of people who've done this before without a doctor, and to learn to trust in the process that for the most part, a baby will be born, it will come out, and it's all set up to naturally happen. But I can understand some men watching might say, but I have a lot of responsibility for this. What if something goes wrong? What if she dies? What if there is blood and hemorrhaging? What do I do? And so I think there's a fear in the father, his masculine protection, So what can you say about that, to overcoming the fear, or how does one work through that?
Well, I can tell you that there will probably always be a little bit of fear,
Mm-hmm.
but we don't need to be dictated to by our fears.
Good
And
point.
if you have some sort of an emergency, and we did with our first home birth, we had to transfer after the birth. Our son was born and he wasn't breathing. I was hemorrhaging. We called 911 and had a transfer.
Yeah.
And again, under this coronavirus model, if you need the hospital, it's still there for you.
Mm-hmm.
You could still go there. The point of having a home birth is out of deep concern that if you go there, you might get the disease. And
Mm-hmm.
so if you absolutely have to go to the hospital and transfer over for help before the birth or after the birth, you just deal with whatever the fallout is. For us, that was, a visit from CPS after the birth. I mean, it was not fun to have a transfer and have all this inquiry into our lifestyle choices.
Yeah.
But, that's just part of the deal.
It was there. It was there.
Yeah. And, with our fifth birth, with this child, as he came out,
Mm-hmm.
As soon as he came out, he started to cry, and we looked at each other and he's like, he's okay. My husband jumped for joy. He leapt in our bedroom, just jumped. Yes, we did it. And it was so triumphant and so real what happened during that birth, because we knew we were okay. We didn't have to go to the hospital. And so it was really powerful to experience that after having a birth that didn't go as planned. And I would like to address emergency childbirth, because you hear emergency and you think scary, scary. Emergency childbirth is just a birth that takes place wherever you're not planning to have it. That means, you go into labor at the grocery store, you go into labor at a park, and here's the baby. So an emergency childbirth is a birth where perhaps you don't have your supplies, where you're just off alone. And so it's my deeply held belief that every couple should prepare for emergency childbirth. No matter what the world conditions are, no matter what's happening outside your door or inside your home, you should all learn the fundamentals of how to catch a baby. That's just my personal belief.
And I want to ask you, I asked this to Laura Shanley a few weeks ago in one of our talks. What are the top, I don't know, two things that you'd want to have at an emergency childbirth? What is needed?
I would like to have something to kind of catch the baby with. If your husband's with you, you could pull off a t-shirt and you want some kind of fabric. The babies are slippery. And so it's nice to just have something to kind of catch them beside your hands, if you can, just to kind of help as they're coming through the birth canal. And then the other thing is just, you said 2 or 3 things?
Or 2.
Well, definitely some water. If you have it, you want to have some water, because right after the birth, your son is going to start to come down. But if the mother's really dehydrated, sometimes it can have a hard time coming down. The best way to get the placenta to detach is to start breastfeeding the baby. As soon as you breastfeed, it causes contractions to happen that help the placenta to come down. And as the placenta is being born, to again kind of be ready to catch it with something, a blanket or a towel, or even people at home births catch it with a bowl, so that you have some place to put it. And just recognize this is part of birth.
Yeah, that's great. And so even in a hospital setting, a woman could assert herself and ask that the baby be given to her right away so she can breastfeed, and not taken away. You don't have to cut the cord. Don't take it away and clean it up and weigh and measure it. Give me my baby, please, for a few minutes, or whatever.
Absolutely. Absolutely. This was something that Dr. Bradley taught, that if you'll just hold the baby down, let gravity allow the blood that's in the placenta to go into the baby before you put it up in the mother's arms. If you just do that for a couple seconds, all the blood that's in the placental canal can go into the baby. And that's very important. So many of our babies come out and they're anemic because they cut the cord so fast. All that blood that could go into the baby is in the placenta, and they use that blood for stem cell research and all sorts of stuff, but that blood belongs to your baby.
And you know how much money's involved. They should pay the mom some money for the things they take from the baby.
Seriously.
So a couple of questions. Susan wonders, what about a bulb syringe? And Billy says, why do they say boiling water on TV shows? I know about the boiling water. Go ahead. What do you think of a bulb syringe?
Bulb syringe is great. We used one with our 5th birth. I had 3 of them in my bedroom during my 4th birth. we didn't remember to use them. So as we were trying to perform CPR, we were trying to get the air in, but we hadn't sucked them out yet. So that was part of the problem. So bulb syringe is great. If you have one, that would be an essential supply if you want to use that. As for boiling water, you see those old timey movies where the woman starts ripping her petticoat and putting it in, matting it together to create a compress, and then go boil some water. What they're preparing for is crowning. And they're going to put that, they're not making soup. They're going to put that compress in the hot water and then place it on the mom's bottom. And that just kind of softens and warms everything up so that the baby can pass easier. And it's just a midwife thing that some doctors actually do that too in the hospital. Mm-hmm. I would contend that your best bet for getting the baby out without tearing your perineum is to have a nice big orgasm. And the reason why is if you manage to have an orgasmic birth, all the blood that's down there in the perineum shoots up into the rest of the body, just like a normal orgasm when you're just having sex. And once that happens, it really decreases the possibility of the mom hemorrhaging, and it assists with what we call the fetal ejection reflex. And this is, mm-hmm. the reason why you have a G-spot. If you don't know what that is, Google it. As the baby's head rolls over the G-spot, you can get a G-spot orgasm, which some women have called the biggest and most pleasurable orgasm of their lives. And this is a great way to birth your kids. It's one of the least known facts about women's bodies. There's people out there in the sex industry who know there's a G-spot, but they don't understand you're supposed to have it when you're having your babies. So that's something that you can think about activities you could engage in during labor that would contribute to that feeling. And I promise you, it will be a great birth.
Okay, I did not experience it, but I have learned about it, and it's not easy for everybody, and I think it's not as common. We can talk about it, but I think it's not easy to achieve, but it's something that women could research during their pregnancies.
Definitely. And it's nice to know that it's a possibility.
It's a possibility. Yes. And so Susan was talking about the forgiveness of our husbands is important. And I just want to say one thing. In marriage, we will have ups and downs, ups and downs. We may have some dark times, even during the pregnancy. We might not be getting along, but it's an opportunity to try to get along and to maybe discuss, honey, I'll really need you. Maybe we're not in a good place now, but with this upcoming birth, let's try to put aside our arguments, our major problems, our minor problems, and let's just try, for the sake of the baby, we can reach a new plateau of newness in our family unit. And so I think forgiveness is excellent, and just being there for each other and trying to let go of criticism and whatever issues that you may be having. It's a time for healing. Having a baby is a time for change and growth. So we can always try to squeeze.
That makes me think of one of my favorite stories. It's from Carol Balizay's book, Born in Zion. And she tells the story of a young couple that was having problems. And I think they were in their early 20s having the first baby. And they decided to do a home birth with just the husband. And the woman just labored and labored, and the baby just wouldn't come. So the husband got down on his knees and started praying. So what do I need to do? What do we need? All of a sudden, he stood up, went to his closet, picked up a big box of pornographic magazines, took them out to the dumpster and threw them in the dumpster, came in, and his wife was pushing the baby out.
Wow.
I love this story for a couple of reasons. Number one, if it had happened in the hospital, they would have just done a section. The baby would have been born. Didn't give the husband any chance for communicating with the Lord, repenting, making his home a cleaner space for this little baby to grow up in. And number two, it's an illustration to me of how much spiritual growth we can experience while we're having our babies alone. Because there will come moments when all you have to turn to while you're having your kids, whether you're in labor or you're taking care of a newborn, when you just have to turn to the Lord and ask for some help. And your communication ability and your ability to listen to those promptings from the Holy Spirit, those are so important when you're pregnant and in labor. And my births have all been guided by the Holy Spirit. I have felt guided to the books I read, to the people I met, to the articles I wrote. Sometimes when I'd write things, I'd get tons of feedback from people. And in that feedback, it get confirmation from other women. Yes, this was helpful to me too. And so I think it's good to recognize that pregnancy is a time for great jumps, leaps in your spirituality. And if you recognize that, you can just run with it.
Very good. Very good. That's so fascinating that the man thought that the porn could have been an issue, that he had another woman, another competition, and he cleared it out and made way. And that's a beautiful story. Okay, so what about, do you want to talk about children at birth, family birth, anything like that?
Yeah, I believe you should just kind of trust the universe on this. With my first home birth, my kids were all elementary school age or younger, and they didn't want to be at the birth. The birth happened in the morning. We invited them up. They were watching Saturday morning cartoons, and they were like, "Yeah, we're watching cartoons. We don't want to come up." My 2-year-old decided to come up, and he watched his little brother be born, and he went around to all the neighbors saying, "Andrew came out of mom's butt." To him, that's what it looked like. I gave birth to those 2 home birth babies standing up. As I got their heads out and I was about to give birth to their shoulders, I dropped down on all fours and was on hands and knees with the first one. The second one, I just gave birth in the goddess position. This is a yoga posture where you're standing up in a semi-squat. It's the superior position to be in while you're birthing a baby. And the absolute worst position you can be in to give birth is on your back with your legs up in the air. Absolute worst. Baby has to go uphill to get over the tip of your spine, of your, what's the bottom of your spine? Cox bone. So you want to just be able to be upright and pushing. I had a birth ball with both of them. Very helpful to sit on the birth ball between contractions. And so that would be the advice for that.
All right. And so what about the economics of home birth? We should talk about money. You can save yourself a lot of hassle with your insurance company. I believe that a vaginal birth in the hospital costs around $30,000 and a C-section around $50,000. And I'm looking at various younger relatives, and they are seeming to pay $4,000 or $5,000 out of pocket for their birth. And that's a lot of money. That can be financially crippling to some families. And so if you do your own prenatal care and a home birth, you can make that a fraction of the cost.
Yeah, Jennifer Margulis, she has a couple of pictorials in one of her books. Unassisted birth, 0, and then she has the dollar amounts for a C-section, a vaginal birth, and it's just hilarious how it's 0, 0, 0.
Yeah.
The economics are definitely a factor, especially as we go forward, and the healthcare system is just pretty much in shambles right now. Nobody knows what's what. You can save yourself so much money if you will make the commitment to having a home birth, breastfeeding your child, and using cloth diapers. The big expenses when you have a child are the ongoing formula and diaper costs if you use plastic. And if you'll just make the commitment right at the beginning of your married life to just have your babies at home and then do those 2 things, breastfeed, cloth diapers, you can have a family, and you can have a family for not very much money. So that would be definitely what I would encourage people to do.
Yeah, and the mother paying for a good diet would be a good thing. Paying to make sure the mom has a good diet. All right, so I guess one of the topics we wanted to talk about, yes, was newborn care. This can be intimidating to fathers. You're going to have this baby, and then when the baby's born, doesn't there need to be, mechanical, medical stuff done to the baby when it's a newborn? What can you say about newborn care in the first few hours or days, week of the baby's life?
Well, the third book I wrote was called A Lotus Birth, and was the story of my 5th child's pregnancy and birth. We didn't cut the cord after he was born, and that's always the biggest question. When do I cut the cord? How do I cut the cord? We didn't do it. We wrapped the placenta, we rinsed the placenta off and then wrapped it up with the baby in his receiving blanket and just let it stay attached until it fell off on its own. You don't have to do this. We chose to do this, but it's a really powerful way to make sure the baby gets every bit and particle of blood from that placenta into their own body. And then when Ben's cord detached, he had such a visceral reaction to that. He barely cried the 6 days before, but once that cord detached, he was mourning. He was weeping as he was crying.
Wow.
There was something there, and I've heard this from other parents who had a Lotus birth, that they were kind of sad when it detached, and then then they got happy again. And so I don't know what's going on with that, but You don't have to go crazy thinking there's all this stuff you need to do. You do need to know that the first poop that comes out is black. It's called meconium. It's a tar-like thick, sticky substance that's been in the baby while it's in the mother. You're going to have that for a couple of days. That's not unusual. Sometimes the little baby girls will have a little blood in their vaginal area, a little first period. That's not unusual. Sometimes the girls will drip a few drops of milk from their breasts. That's scary, but it's just hormones in their body from their mother working their way out. Some of these things can be unnerving and scary to people. And so it's just good to know they can happen. You don't need to circumcise a baby if you don't want. Totally optional. So these are the things they do in the hospital that you think, oh, I have to have this checked out. The thing that I would say in terms of parents getting help beyond their own care is to listen to their own gut feeling about something being off with their kid. And I've had lots of home birth friends who said they had that prompting. You need to go get this checked out. One, the baby had a heart defect that they had to have an operation. And this mother was still grateful they gave birth to her at home.
Yeah.
And they went and got the help they needed. And so that was powerful. But you as a parent have this authority over your family that you can tap into and say, you know, if I need something, I really need something for this kid, I can go get it. And that's a blessing. So, you know, there's so much information out there about childcare. I don't need to give you all the details.
And another thing that I want to mention, because this comes up with me a lot. What do I do about a birth certificate? What do I do about a social security number? What should and building a network. I believe, Jenny, it's very important to build a network in your environment. Keep your eyes and ears open for a pediatrician that does not force you to have the baby to have immunizations, a more friendly in alignment with your values, and keep searching and talking and meeting with friends and people. Well, what doctor is favorable to breastfeeding? Who's not, you know, looking for people who will support you in your family's journey. And there are doctors and professional medical people out there. You just have to keep looking. And there are probably a couple in your community. It's worth driving 45 minutes and going out of your way. It might be worth paying out of pocket to get the kind of medical health care that your family, you know, needs to support what you want to do. So
I totally agree. We had a very friendly MD who worked with us with not vaccinating. I'm vaccine damaged, so I didn't want my kids to get it because of epigenetics. But he was very, very friendly to that choice. And then we used our chiropractor for almost everything that ailed us. And then the few times my kids needed interface with MDs, we just, you know, my son, tip of his finger was amputated. Of course, I'm not going to take him to the chiropractor for that. You know, again, common sense. Use your common sense. You know when you need to get medical professional help for certain things, and other things you can do yourself.
All right. Well, great. Well, we're at about 32 minutes now, and we wanted to keep this around 30. We've covered so many topics. Is there anything that we've forgotten or that you want to you know, summarize?
I just want to do a shout out to all the dads. We know that when you take this on, if something bad was to happen, that there might be some really evil people who might say something horrifying to you. But in my experience, most people are kind. Most people are big-hearted. And when we had, quote, a botched home birth, our community, our faith community, our family, they cloistered around us and they just wanted to help. So don't make your decisions based on fear that if something goes wrong, you're going to become just a pariah in your community. In fact, I think we're finally at the point where all you have to do is say, I don't want my wife to be in a hospital where there are corona patients, and people immediately get it. You know, I would say things like that to people. I'd say, I don't want to be around all the germs at a hospital. I'm allergic to chemicals. And that it just wasn't quite enough. Most people still thought I was a dingbat for having unassisted births, but you know, it's a different age. And I think, you know, if you explain that to people and just say, I'm concerned about the health of my wife and my child, and so we've decided to do it at home, and I'm going to be the one catching the baby, you know, I don't think people will really judge you too harshly for that. So.
Well, that's great. Thank you, Jenny. It's been great talking with you. JennyHatch.com website. Her book is Elijah Birth, Lotus Birth. Look them up on Amazon and download them for your solid reading about childbirth and for good stories, for stuff you might not have read about. It's just very inspiring. So, and you're very inspiring. So thanks, Jen, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks, Lynn. Love you.
Okay, bye.
Bye-bye.